It was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life, sitting with my new husband, looking through our wedding photos, reliving the joy of our big day. But what happened next shattered everything. While flipping through the pictures, Mark froze, his face turning pale. "She's in the background," he whispered. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but when I turned and saw the face in the photo, my heart stopped, and that was just the beginning. I'm Lily Bennett, and like many women, I had spent years dreaming about my wedding day. Mark and I had been together for 5 years before we finally tied the knot. He was my best friend, my partner in every way, and we'd built such a solid foundation together. Our wedding was everything I had hoped for, intimate, filled with love, and surrounded by our closest family and friends. The day felt perfect. We were perfect. The next morning, we woke up in our new home, still basking in the glow of the day before. The sun streamed through the windows, and the whole house felt light and warm. The idea of looking through our wedding photos sounded like the perfect way to continue celebrating. I was excited to relive the day, to look at all the pictures that had captured our love and happiness. Mark and I sat together on the couch, flipping through the album that the photographer had delivered. Each photo told a story. Our first kiss as husband and wife, the smile on my father's face as he walked me down the aisle, the laughter shared between our closest friends. It felt so natural, like we were still in the moment, living that joy all over again. As I looked at one photo, Mark's finger hovered over the page, and he suddenly stopped. "Lily," he said, his voice sounding strangely quiet, almost as if he were holding back something. "She's in the background." I glanced up at him, thinking he was just being silly, pointing out some random person I hadn't noticed before. "What do you mean, she's in the background?" I asked, laughing lightly, thinking he was just playing around. He didn't laugh back, though. He looked at the photo again, his face growing serious. "Look," he said, his finger tracing the outline of a figure standing just behind the guests in the photo. At first, I didn't understand what he was talking about. It was a wide shot from our reception, and there were several people standing and mingling in the background. But as I followed where Mark was pointing, I noticed a woman's face. I looked at the photo again, my stomach sinking. It was a woman I didn't recognize standing behind our guests, almost blending into the background. She had dark hair, and although her face was partially obscured, I could make out a faint, eerie smile. There was something about her that felt out of place. I frowned, thinking I had just missed her in the chaos of the wedding. But Mark's face had gone pale, and he wasn't smiling anymore. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice softer now, filled with confusion. Mark hesitated, his eyes scanning the photo like he was trying to place her. "I don't know," he said quietly, his tone serious now, "but I've seen her before." I stared at him, trying to understand what he was saying. "What do you mean, you've seen her before? Where?" Mark's eyes darted nervously. "I don't know. It's just, this isn't the first time I've noticed her. I think she's been following me for a while." A chill ran down my spine. I couldn't make sense of what Mark was saying. This was a wedding photo. How could he have seen this woman before? Why would she have been at our wedding? I started to laugh, trying to dismiss the uneasy feeling growing inside me. "Mark, are you joking? Maybe she was just a guest or someone who was part of the catering staff," I suggested, but the laugh didn't come out right. The words sounded hollow in my own ears. Mark didn't laugh with me. His eyes remained locked on the photo, his expression serious and tense. "I don't think so, Lily. I'm not sure, but something about this doesn't feel right." I shook my head, trying to push aside the sense of dread creeping in. It was just a weird coincidence. A woman in the background, someone we didn't know, but Mark's reaction didn't sit right with me. Why was he so uneasy? Why did he look so afraid? The room felt smaller all of a sudden. The happy memories of the night before, the joy of our wedding, seemed to slip away as that stranger's face in the background of our photo began to haunt me. There was something about it, something about her, that felt wrong. And for the first time, I realized that maybe I wasn't the only one Mark had been thinking about when he said, "I do." I forced myself to shake the thought away, but as I stared at the photo, I couldn't stop looking at her face. Something wasn't adding up, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what it meant. The more I stared at the woman in the background of our wedding photo, the more my stomach twisted. Mark was still looking at the picture, but his eyes were distant, lost in thought. He kept repeating, "I've seen her before," but I couldn't make sense of what he meant. The woman's face in the photo was partially obscured, but it was enough to recognize something about her. Her eyes were unsettling. There was a strange intensity in her gaze that made me feel uncomfortable, like she was staring right at us, even though she wasn't the focus of the photo. It made my heart race, and my thoughts began to spiral. I looked up at Mark, searching his face for some explanation, but his expression was hard to read. He had always been so confident, so steady, and now he looked like he had just seen a ghost. His usual calm demeanor had vanished, replaced with something more frantic. I had never seen him like this before. "Mark," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Who is she? Why does she look so familiar to you?" He didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched, and he started running his fingers through his hair. "I don't know. I wish I could explain it," he muttered. "But she's been showing up in strange places, Lily. And now I see her here, at our wedding." The words hung in the air, thick with confusion. I felt the color drain from my face. "What do you mean she's been showing up? Are you telling me she's been following you?" I asked, my voice growing more frantic. Mark looked at me, but instead of reassurance, his eyes were filled with uncertainty. He nodded slowly, as if he didn't know how to put what he was feeling into words. "I don't know how else to explain it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's like she's been appearing at random times in my life. I saw her at a work event last month. I've spotted her in the background of some photos from old trips. And now, here she is, again, at our wedding." My heart began to race. This wasn't just some weird coincidence anymore. My mind couldn't process what he was saying, and the images of that strange woman began to fill my thoughts. Was Mark hiding something from me? Was this someone from his past? Someone I didn't know about? I wanted to brush it off, to believe that this was just some fluke, but deep down, I couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling building inside me. "Mark, why didn't you tell me about her before? Why didn't you mention her at all?" I asked, my voice trembling with frustration. He didn't answer right away. His eyes darted to the wedding photo again, his fingers grazing the edges of the page like he was afraid to touch it for too long. I could tell that this was weighing heavily on him, but I was struggling to understand why it seemed to be affecting him so much. "I didn't want to worry you," Mark finally said. "I thought it was just my imagination, that I was seeing things. But now that she's in our wedding photo, I can't ignore it anymore." I sat there, stunned by his admission. I wanted to believe him, to trust that he hadn't been hiding anything. But the more I thought about it, the more questions flooded my mind. Why hadn't he told me about this woman earlier? Why hadn't he been more open with me about her presence in his life? And why did he seem so frightened now? The last thing I wanted was to feel like I was being kept in the dark, but it felt like there were things about Mark's past that I had never known. My thoughts swirled around in my head, trying to make sense of the pieces. Could this woman be someone from his past? An ex-girlfriend, maybe? But if that were true, why had he never mentioned her to me before? And why did she keep showing up at odd moments? It didn't make sense. I had always trusted Mark completely, and the idea that he might have been hiding something, especially something so strange, was almost too much to bear. "Mark," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to know the truth. You can't keep this from me anymore. Who is she? What is going on?" He looked at me, his expression torn between guilt and confusion. "I don't know," he admitted, shaking his head. I wish I could explain it to you, but I can't. All I know is that she's been in the background of my life, and I don't understand why she's here now. I don't know why she's at our wedding. The words hit me like a wave. I had no idea what was happening, but it was clear now that there was something Mark hadn't shared with me. I was left with more questions than answers, and with each passing second, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. How could I trust Mark if I didn't even know the full truth about his past? And who was this mysterious woman who seemed to be lurking in the shadows of our life together? My mind raced, jumping from one possibility to the next. I felt trapped, caught in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I wanted to believe that Mark was telling the truth, but the more I looked at that photo, the more I realized that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the woman in the background. It was the fact that Mark had kept this from me for so long. I didn't know where to go from here, but I knew I couldn't just ignore it. I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. As the minutes stretched into hours, I sat there with Mark, the wedding album open between us, staring at the photo that seemed to hold a secret neither of us could fully grasp. Mark's admission that the woman in the background had been showing up in his life over the years left me feeling overwhelmed, torn between trust and doubt. The man I had married, the one I thought I knew so well, had just revealed something that sent my world spinning. It felt like a betrayal, not because of the woman herself, she was a stranger to me, but because Mark hadn't told me about her. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. I could see Mark was struggling, too. His hands were shaking slightly as he turned the pages of the album. Though his eyes were fixed on the photo, he wasn't looking at me anymore. It was like he was avoiding my gaze. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he wasn't hiding something deeper. But the doubt that had started to creep in was now impossible to ignore. What else had he been hiding? If he hadn't told me about her, what else was there in his past that I didn't know? I had to face the truth. The more I tried to push the thoughts aside, the more the questions kept resurfacing. My mind raced as I stood up abruptly. I need to do something, I said, my voice shaky but determined. I felt like I couldn't sit there anymore, as if every second spent in that living room with the photos and the unanswered questions was suffocating me. Mark looked up at me, his face filled with confusion, but I could tell he wasn't fully ready to confront what was happening. I was, though. I had to be. I'm going to find out who she is, I said firmly, though I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to do that. Mark looked at me, his expression a mix of concern and guilt. Lily, don't, he pleaded. Please, just trust me. I'm telling you everything I know, but I couldn't. I couldn't just sit back and wait for him to give me more half-truths. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when something felt so wrong. I needed answers. So, I grabbed my phone from the table, my fingers trembling as I dialed the number of the wedding photographer. My mind was set. I needed to know more, and I was willing to do whatever it took. The phone rang, and I held my breath, waiting. The photographer, a friendly woman named Rachel, answered after a few moments. "Hello, Rachel?" I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's Lily Bennett. I hope you're doing well. I just have a quick question for you about some of the wedding photos." "Of course, Lily. How are you? Everything go well after the wedding?" she asked, clearly enthusiastic. I forced a smile, even though she couldn't see it. "I'm good, thank you," I replied. "Listen, I was just going through the album and I noticed something strange in one of the pictures. There's a woman in the background, and I was wondering if you had any idea who she is?" Rachel didn't seem immediately concerned. She said, flipping through her notes. "I've got the album in front of me here. Can you describe the photo for me?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "It's one from the reception, near the dance floor. The woman is standing in the corner, mostly hidden by other people. She has dark hair and Well, she's not in the foreground, but she's clearly visible if you look closely. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yes, Rachel said slowly. I know exactly which photo you're talking about. She was a guest at the wedding, and she did stay for most of the reception, but I'm not sure who she is either, to be honest. I didn't recognize her at the time, and I didn't think to ask. I'm sorry I can't help more. My heart sank as I realized that Rachel couldn't provide any useful information. She hadn't recognized her either, and she didn't seem to have any more details to offer. Okay, thank you anyway, Rachel, I said, feeling a wave of disappointment wash over me. I hung up, still clutching my phone. I stared at it for a moment, my frustration building. This was only getting more complicated. I sat down on the couch again, the weight of the situation sinking in. Mark was still sitting there, looking at me with concern. Lily, please don't do this, he said softly, his voice pleading. Now, we'll figure it out together, okay? We don't need to go digging up things from the past. I turned to face him, my emotions bubbling to the surface. You don't get it, Mark. I can't just ignore this. You've been hiding something from me, and I need to know what it is. I need to know the truth. Mark's face fell, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of my words had physically drained him. He opened his mouth, but then closed it again, unsure of what to say. I wasn't sure if I was prepared for the truth, but I had reached a breaking point. This wasn't just about a photo anymore. It was about trust, about the foundation of our relationship that suddenly felt shaky and uncertain. I'm not going to stand here and let this eat me alive, Mark, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I'm going to find out who she is, and I won't stop until I do. Mark didn't argue this time. He sat silently, his gaze fixed on the floor. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but it was too late for apologies. I was no longer waiting for him to give me answers. I had to take control of the situation. I had to know the truth, no matter what it cost. And as I stood up and walked toward the door, the resolve in my chest only grew stronger. The only thing that mattered now was finding out what Mark was hiding, and I was ready to face whatever that truth would bring. The hours after my conversation with Mark were filled with a suffocating silence. I could feel the tension between us, thick in the air, as if it was pressing on every inch of the room. Mark hadn't said much after I told him I was going to find out the truth. He just sat there, quietly staring into space, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. I knew that he was struggling, torn between the truth and the fear of what would happen if I found out. But I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. I spent the next few hours scouring the internet, digging through social media, and looking for any clues I could find. I was desperate for answers. Each search made my heart race, my hands tremble with anticipation. I felt like I was unraveling something that had been hidden for too long, something that had always been there beneath the surface. It wasn't just about the woman in the photo anymore. It was about the truth, about Mark, about the life we had built together. The more I searched, the more questions I had, and the more I realized I didn't know if I could trust the man I had married. At one point, I found a name, a social media account linked to a woman named Clara, the same woman from the photo. Her account was private, but there was a mutual friend from Mark's college days. That was the first real lead I'd found. I clicked through, feeling my heart pound in my chest. I had to know if this was the same woman, and if so, what the connection was. I messaged the mutual friend, explaining the situation as briefly as possible, just asking if they knew anything about Clara. When the message went through, I felt like I was waiting for something big to happen, something that would either confirm my suspicions or shatter them completely. About an hour later, I received a reply. The message was short but direct. Clara was Mark's ex. They were serious for a while, even after college, but he broke it off. She never took it well. I didn't know she was at your wedding. The words hit me like a slap to the face. Mark had been hiding this from me. He had kept his past with Clara hidden, never telling me about their relationship, never even mentioning her name. The truth was staring me in the face now, and it was too much to ignore. Everything I thought I knew about Mark seemed to be crumbling in front of me. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mark's number, my heart pounding in my ears. It rang a few times before he picked up. His voice was low, hesitant. "Lily," he said, sounding almost afraid. "What's going on?" "I know who she is," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. "I know about Clara. Why didn't you tell me about her, Mark?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Lily, Mark started, but I cut him off, too angry to let him make excuses. "Don't," I said, my voice sharp. "Don't tell me you were just trying to protect me. You were hiding something from me. Why wasn't I allowed to know about her, about your past? Why wasn't she mentioned once when we were planning our wedding?" Mark let out a sigh, his voice trembling now. "Lily, it wasn't like that. I didn't want to bring it up because it's in the past. I ended things with Clara a long time ago, and I thought I had moved on. But when she showed up at our wedding, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to ruin our day, make it about her." "Make it about her?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're telling me that she showed up at our wedding, and you didn't think it was important enough to tell me? You kept that from me, Mark. That's not just about the past. That's about our future. That's about trust." Mark's voice was soft, almost pleading. "Lily, I never meant for this to hurt you. I swear, I never thought she'd show up. I had no idea she was going to be there, and I didn't know what to say when I saw her. It was a mistake, and I should have told you earlier, but I didn't want to hurt you." His words were laced with regret, but they didn't make me feel better. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the more I thought about everything, the secrecy, the lies, the tension, I realized that this was bigger than just one mistake. It was about a pattern of hiding things from me, things that should have been shared. I had given him my trust, and he had broken it. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling, "I can't do this. I can't keep living in the dark. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. I need to feel safe in my own marriage. And right now, I don't." There was silence on the other end, and I knew that this was the moment of no return. I had heard enough. I had been patient enough. But now, the damage had been done. I couldn't go back to the way things were. "I need space," I said, my voice cracking. "I need time to think about everything." I hung up the phone before he could respond. My heart felt like it was breaking, but I knew I had to do what was best for me. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't, and I couldn't allow myself to live with this betrayal any longer. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze. I looked at the wedding photos again, and for the first time, I didn't see the memories I had once cherished. All I could see was the woman in the background, the face that had changed everything. And as the night stretched on, I realized that I had to take control of my life. No more living in uncertainty. No more second-guessing. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep the wedding album, a reminder of all the lies. I deleted every single photo, the ones that once held so much joy, and as the album disappeared from my phone, I changed the locks on the house. It was time to move forward. No matter how much it hurt, I had to protect myself and my future. The truth had come to light, and I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Trust is fragile, and once it's broken, it's almost impossible to repair. The days after I confronted Mark felt like I was living in a fog. The weight of the decision I had made to change the locks, to delete the wedding photos, was still heavy on my chest, but I knew it was necessary. The woman in the background of the photo, Clara, had become a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. It wasn't just the fact that Mark had kept her from me. It was the realization that I had been blind to the cracks in our relationship. I had trusted him without question, believed in the perfect life we were building. But now that trust was shattered. The morning after I made the decision to change the locks, I sat in the living room, staring out the window at the quiet street outside. It was the first moment of peace I had felt in days, but it was fleeting. I knew I had to face the reality of what came next. Mark had tried to apologize, tried to explain himself, but the damage had already been done. Words couldn't fix what had been broken. Mark called me several times that day, but I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready to hear what he had to say. I had already heard it all. How sorry he was. How much he regretted hiding the truth. How he never meant for it to come to this. But none of that mattered anymore. I couldn't pretend I didn't feel betrayed. I couldn't ignore the fact that he had kept something so important from me. Something that would have changed the way I looked at our relationship from the start. I couldn't just brush it aside because he was sorry. I needed to protect myself first. I spent the next few days in a haze of emotions. I stayed at home, going through the motions of daily life, but everything felt different. Every corner of the house, every item that had once symbolized our life together, now felt tainted. I couldn't look at the wedding dress hanging in the closet without feeling a pang of pain. I couldn't walk past the living room without remembering how we had laughed and made plans for our future. It was all a lie now, at least in my eyes. The life I thought we had built together wasn't what I had imagined. It had been based on a foundation of half-truths and hidden secrets. But amidst the pain, something else started to emerge: clarity. I realized that, in order to move forward, I had to reclaim my sense of self. I couldn't keep living in the shadows of Mark's past mistakes. I had to step into my own light, even if it meant facing the uncomfortable truth that not every relationship is meant to last forever. I had to learn to trust myself again, to make choices that were in my best interest, not just for the sake of holding on to something that was broken. I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. I couldn't just erase the years I had spent with Mark, the love I had thought we shared. I had invested so much into our marriage, believing in the vows we made, trusting that we were building a life together. But the reality was, we had been living in two different worlds, and I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I needed honesty, transparency, and trust in my relationships, and Mark had failed to provide that. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I wanted from my future. I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad, yes, but more than anything, I was determined. I couldn't let this define me, and I couldn't let it destroy me. It was time to take control of my life, to reclaim my peace, and to rediscover who I was outside of a marriage that no longer served me. Eventually, I picked up the phone and called Mark. I hadn't spoken to him in days, and the silence between us had been deafening. When I heard his voice, it was full of uncertainty, but there was a quiet hope in it too. "Lily, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice shaky. "I don't know how to fix this, but I will do whatever it takes to make things right." I took a deep breath before responding. "Mark, I don't know if there's anything that can be fixed. I need time to think, to figure out what I really want. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I need space to heal, and I need to trust myself again before I can even think about what comes next." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear the weight of my words settling in. He didn't argue, didn't try to convince me to stay. "I understand, Lily. I'll give you the space you need. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'll be waiting if you ever decide you want to talk." I hung up the phone, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Mark and I would ever find a way back to each other, or if this was the end of our story. But in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. I had chosen myself, and that was the first step toward healing. The days turned into weeks, and I focused on rebuilding my life. I took time for myself, reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering passions I had forgotten, and slowly, I started to feel whole again. The pain didn't go away overnight, but I was learning to live with it, to move forward. I wasn't sure if I would ever trust someone the same way again, but I knew that I had learned some invaluable lessons. I had learned to listen to my instincts, to prioritize my well-being, and most importantly, I had learned that my happiness was not dependent on anyone but myself. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from the lies, free from the uncertainty, and free to live my life on my own terms. And that, I realized, was the most important thing of all.